Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Warlord Games has released an Errata for Bolt Action again. I'm sure that there are, as we speak, Reddit posts of people going absolutely AWire about how awful this is and how it's ruined the game. But ignoring all of that, let's have a look at what's going on. I have been kind of starting to do this as a little bit of a thing every time it comes out, but sometimes I just don't know until like 2 or 3 days after it comes out, so whenever I get to it is whenever I get to it. But here we go, we have February 28th, 2024, FAQ and Errata for Bolt Action, and as always, as is usual for this type of thing, the updates for this particular release will be in green. So what we do is just scroll through the whole thing until we find some green. And that didn't take long at all. So what we have... Oh, actually, that's interesting. So what we have here is multiple vehicles that are coming in for any army. We've had the field ambulance previously replacing the foot medic as an option for any army. But now we have 12 model transport truck, utility car, 3 artillery tractor can tow any vehicle, any artillery piece. Not any howitzer though. And Austra and Limber can literally soft skin 3+ and can tow any gun or howitzer. Right, so this is giving all of the nations kind of a level playing field for the really basic stuff that everyone should be able to access. Like, anyone should be able to take a utility car, although this utility car could be a civilian vehicle. It doesn't necessarily have to be like Jeep, Kuragane, Kubawagen, that kind of thing. It could be a civilian car that's been borrowed to be used. Similarly with the truck, I noticed that it does have the medium machine gun option for the truck. One of the nations, I remember someone was saying that they had the option for a truck, but they couldn't have the machine gun on it. But now they can, so that's useful. Leveling the playing field on the absolute basic stuff, that, like I say, that everyone should be able to field a rifle squad, everyone should be able to field a truck and a car, because that's easy to get to. What do we have here? So, armies of Germany, we have some of the SDKFZs are removing the open top special rule for a 5-point increase. So the 221, 222 and 223, and then the 250-9. Are those mesh vehicles? Hold on a second. Yeah, they are. So there has been a bit of a debate back and forth because some of the vehicles with mesh on the turret are considered open top and some of them are not. So it looks like now they are all, or at least several more of them, are considered not open-topped because they have the mesh. Okay, that's interesting. Being a bit more consistent between whether that kind of mesh roof counts as an open-topped or not is a nice thing, although I would have gone the other way, perhaps. And for 5 points, although they are all kind of armoured cars, so 5 points isn't a big deal for them. SDKFZ 250/4 AA half-track. 75 points for 2 medium machine guns. Although this one remains open-top, no mesh here. Yes, I think tactically there are better options for the armoured car slot for the Germans, but double machine gun anti-aircraft half-track. If they existed, it's worth having it in the game, so it's not all about competitive play. I'm sure there's someone thinking that this would make a good model to paint up, and that is perfectly valid as well. So it looks like the Sherman Crocodile is gaining a gyro-stabilized main gun. So same for the Sherman Zippo and the Sherman Crocodile, both getting probably an increase in points for veteran and gyro-stabilized main gun. Not gyro-stabilized flamethrower, just the anti-tank gun. So the English are getting a Commandos light machine gun team with a Vickers K, which gets the extra shot. There we go, Vickers getting the extra shot. Tough fighters included. Not really that it's a two model team. Having tough fighters is not really that useful, but outflanking, I'm not sure if that's a real benefit for a machine gun team. Maybe it is. A light machine gun with an extra shot is basically a better medium machine gun, because it's 5 shots but they get to move, and it's not fixed. They get to move and shoot, and they don't have the penalty of the 90-degree front arc. Interesting that they're going it alone with just a ED-SKaR, but sure, it's an option. I'm sure I think I'd almost certainly rather have this than a medium machine gun team, like Vickers Maxim or something like that. But I'm still not sure if I would want this option. But it's an option. So some of the French vehicles are changing to capacity 6. I have no idea what they were originally, so that's not helpful. Polish sniper team, and that is a standard 50 and 65 points sniper team. So did the Polish not get a sniper originally? Can be used in theatre selectors that include the marksman. So they have the marksman but not the sniper, I assume. And now they're getting sniper. Okay. So from Italy and the Axis, the Hungarian cavalry. The unit special rule should be deleted, thus allowing cavalry to charge into combat as normal. I haven't got the armies of Italy in the Axis book. I should, because I've got an Italian army, but could Hungarian cavalry not charge before? Well, they can now. And they get light machine gun and Panzerfaust. 10 points for a Panzerfaust. Okay, also for the Italians, we're getting some extra vehicles. So the P26/40 heavy tank. It's heavy by Italian standards. And actually it is a pretty decent option. 9+ without like the vulnerable riveted weak sides or anything like that a lot of Italian vehicles have. 180 points with medium anti-tank gun and a coax. This is like solid extra medium territory. Like this really is. This is a solid extra medium tank for the Italians now. I'm assuming this is going to be late. Yeah, so 1943 onwards. That is an interesting option. The Italians actually do have a fairly good set of tanks for bolt action. Better in bolt action than they are in real life, perchance, because of just the sheer number of machine guns. 2, 3, 4 machine guns in some cases. They are pretty solid. And with all the detrimental special rules, they end up being quite cheap. Although that does mean that they're quite vulnerable. This is an Italian Sherman. It doesn't have the hull gun, the hull machine gun. But other than that, it's straight up the same as a T-34, some of the Panzer 3 and 4 variants. Yeah, I like that. I might have to just quickly look up what is a P2640. That very much looks just like any of the other P13, P14, but just a little bit bigger perhaps. And even here, this article is calling it Italy's T-34. I might have to pick one of those up for my Italians, because light tanks are great, and I do like them, but an extra medium, definitely a good choice. We also have a Fiat Protetto, so I think that translates to armoured carrier. Or it doesn't translate to armoured carrier, but it's the Italian term for what we would call an armoured carrier. 20 transport capacity. But you don't have a machine gun as standard. Right. So I was going to say this is cheaper than something like an M3 half-track or a 251. But it doesn't come with a machine gun as standard. So there's a 10 point for the first machine gun. That makes it 100 points, which makes sense because it's got a much larger capacity. But 20... You could fit a whole platoon in there. You could certainly fit some of the Case Blue big squads. Some of them got up to 16, 18 or 20 even. Okay, another one here. Flamethrower team is being added to Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria. Again, like some of the previous ones, this just looks like a standard. There's a lot of this going around. I think there is an effort to balancing out a lot of the nations. A lot of theatre selectors limit in what you can take. Like, you can't take flamethrowers, you can't take certain vehicles, you can't take certain types of infantry. And that makes a lot of sense. But when a whole nation, like the minor nations particularly, don't have those options at all, they can never take them. They can never take flamethrower until now. So I think that's a good thing. It makes the minor nations a lot easier to get into. The special rules for some of the minor nations kind of suck. Some of them are awesome, actually, saying that. The Finns, hello, Finns. Yes, good. So, flamethrower team added in for these nations, balancing out the pack. Oh, good grief. Okay. I will read these and get back to you. So, the first one here is talking about artillery that lose crew can use an advance order to move the crew back into cohesion. I actually did a video recently where I talk about basing artillery pieces, and I mentioned in there the unit coherency. You have to be within 2 inches of the gun barrel and 1 inch of other crew. But you can just choose which model, and you would just choose a model that isn't out of cohesion. But if you did end up choosing one that was that meant the remaining models are out of unit coherency, you can use an advance order just to move the crew and still get to fire. They get the -1 because crew are moving around, and that's fair, but that clears that up. I probably would have played it that way anyway, thinking about it. The next one's just talking about pins from being assaulted. Close quarter attacks do not cause pins, but if you do damage to a vehicle, then you do get pins. Interesting. So the next one is talking about gaining movement distance by rotating, because you pivot a vehicle around its center point, but you measure then from like the front of the hull, you move it, then you measure from the front to the front of the hull where it ends up. And some people have, particularly power gamers, are putting their models sideways right up against the front of their deployment zone so that they can turn, which gives them the tiny part of the vehicle like sticking out their deployment zone, and then they can move and they gain that tiny little bit of movement, and that's allowed by the rules. Confirmed that is allowed by the rules. You're just a bit silly for doing it because you're gaining that much movement. Who cares, really? There's a mention here of the 1 inch gap and how a unit in a building and a unit outside a building would behave. And it says it's good practice to keep 1 inch away from the building if there's an enemy unit in the building, unless you've assaulted it. Although best practice, good practice, doesn't mean you have to do that, which is interesting. And this one is really cool. So Mountaineers, several units in the case blue, particularly the Alpini that I'm painting up for my Italians, they treat rough ground as open ground. And so, and then that specifies that for movement, but that also means that when you charge an enemy unit that's taking cover in rough ground, they would usually fight simultaneously because the defending unit has cover. But the Alpini ignore that because they treat rough ground as open ground, and so the Alpini can charge into rough ground and fight first. My Alpini just got better. Nice. And any Mountaineer unit. I like a lot. I should probably finish painting them so that I can use them in exactly that way. No, really? Oh, good grief. So in certain factions, particularly the French, I think you can take 3 bike and sidecars as a single armoured car entry, which means that in an armoured platoon where you can take 5 armoured car entries, or armoured car or tank entries, that means you can take 15 bikes in a single armoured platoon. That's silly. That's very silly. It's also terrible. Why would you do that? I'm loving the idea of turning up against someone's T-34 platoon with 15 bikes. You can't hurt tanks with a machine gun bike. You just can't. You can't ram them. You can't. It's silly. It's terrible. And there's someone at my local group who is right now painting up a whole bunch of bikes to do this because it's silly. Marvelous. Let's roll on and see if we can find some more. So here's one for flamethrowers or squads with 2 flamethrowers. If they fire at the same unit, you only take 1 lot of the pins from being hit by flamethrowers, and you take the flamethrower test once. You don't take the pins and the test for each flamethrower, you just take it once for the unit shooting with flamethrowers. Which makes a lot of sense, because otherwise, shooting the flamethrowers sequentially and taking tests twice, almost guaranteed to knock just about any unit off the table. Yeah, it would be very silly if that was the case. And here we've got the Soviet tank riders, artillery bombardment, forward air observers, and all of this do make your tank riders jump off. Basically, any time that the vehicle might be hit by anything, they're going to jump off. A mention of Tiger Fear, and that passengers in a transport vehicle have line of sight to nothing, and so therefore are not affected by Tiger Fear. It makes sense. It actually does make a lot of sense. But there's options for being very silly with that. I might reread some rules just to make sure I'm reading that right, or understanding that right. Yep, question here for the French partisan bombs. They use a 6-inch blast radius, unless you put it in a building, in which case it behaves like HE, and instead of using the blast marker or the 6-inch area, you use a dice roll to work out how many hits, or you're targeting the building directly. 6-inch blast, that's definitely going to take that down the building. For all books, the Naval Observer is being changed to 180 points and 195 points. How much was it originally? I have no idea. I should have my books with me to check this kind of thing. I'm not sure if that's going up or down. 180 points seems like rather a lot for a single model. Are Naval Observers really that good? Oh, Case Blue. This is a book that I got recently, so let's have a read through this. Bicycle and motorcycle are changing in points cost. Improvised AT. Change the rule to the following: when rolling to penetrate enemy vehicles using anti-tank grenades or heavy weapons with less than 3... Yeah. That's right, okay. So people have been questioning whether the improvised AT counts for small arms versus trucks. The way it was originally written implied that is the case. But now this is specifying that no, it's only for weapons, heavy weapons, so you have to have a penetration value to begin with, but less than 3+. So it's basically anti-tank rifles, heavy machine guns, autocannons? So it's only for those. Realistically, this rule is only applying to anti-tank grenades. Although I guess quite a few there's quite a few options to take autocannons for the Italians. A lot of the armed cars have that. AB-41. I have an AB-41, so actually, yes, it's going to apply for that. So the Romanian armies are getting stragglers for all of the infantry, so you can have just a whole straggler platoon if you really, really wanted to. Okay, so the special rules from Case Blue, the national traits for Slovakian army, because there is no Slovakian army in any other book, you have to use the rules in Case Blue. But the other nations, particularly the Italians, you do need permission from your opponent to use Case Blue rules, which is odd because Case Blue is an official supplement. You would expect it to be allowed, but in this case, the national rules, from Case Blue are pretty solid. Like they're not massively overpowered, and then for the Italians, it's definitely fixing the issues that we had with the original special rules. I can't see why that wouldn't be allowed. That should be allowed in all cases. Now, when you look at some of the theatre selectors, there's some very silly stuff in there, particularly armoured trains, which fantastic for thematic games. But if you turn up to a tournament with an armoured train platoon, that just causes so many problems. So now we're getting into the other campaign books. This is going to be probably a little less interesting, particularly as I don't have any of them except for Case Blue that I've mentioned. But the Americans are getting M1 mortar carrier, and something is losing the D-Day only special rule, whatever that is. There's a Jeep in one of the books that didn't have a transport capacity. Now it does. Fortress Budapest is specifying where the Hungarian parachute assault troops can be used. Okay, so for Italy, the Italian Tough Gut book, there's 2.5 pages of extra stuff. Although, campaign, like there's missions here. Huh. Extra units, a bunch of them. Theatre selectors being changed. And then a bunch of new scenarios. I'm actually going to read through these scenarios separately. I won't go through that in this video. But that has always been the interesting part of the campaign books. Some of the missions in there, it gives you a different perspective on how you can play the game. Because a lot of people are kind of talking about the competitive side and having a balanced kind of to and fro kind of game, whereas there's really it's a historical game. You should be able to play historical missions as well, and particularly asymmetrical historical missions. So that's where this stuff actually reminds you that that's a valid way of playing, and I highly recommend you do play some of that at some point. For Mariana and Palau, the canister round for the 37mm does, it ignores cover, but it will include most of the other modifiers, so just shooting rules, turning your 37mm into a big old shotgun. I approve of that. Is that for the Americans? I'm going to have to check that, because that could be fun. In New Guinea, one of the scout units can take a submachine gun. Great. Or they can all take submachine guns. And we're right at the end, last page. Let's see what the last few options here are. So the medium machine gun Auklangruppe is changing from recon vehicle and open tops to recce. That's fine. And the SAS infantry section in the Western Desert that we have originally was saying 1 officer and 3 additional models, and up to 3 additional models, but now it's 1 NCO and 3 models. An NCO rather than a properly commissioned officer. That makes more sense. Have people been playing that with like lieutenant rules? Having a lieutenant in a squad would be interesting. Probably not worth the points though, because it would end up being 50 points. 75 points if it's SAS, because it would be veteran. Anyway, that is that. We have had another look at some Errata. The biggest parts of it seems to just be balancing out some of the minor nations to all have the same options. The truck, the flamethrower, the sniper, the jeep, all of those kind of things. Everyone now has access to them. It makes things, yeah, just a little bit more balanced for those minor nations. There was some interesting stuff as well. Some of the new vehicles for the Italians. That P26 is something I might just have to have a look at. But really, there's not a whole heap of changes. There's nothing that's fundamentally breaking the game, although there are a few things that are making certain units much more or much less effective, which should be interesting. But thank you very much for watching. Just me rambling on and reading through these again. As I get more books, I should probably just have the books next to me. Remind me next time when there's an Errata. Firstly, tell me there's an Errata coming, because I always miss these. And secondly, remind me to have the books to hand so that I can compare what the original and the updated version are. But whenever that is, in a few months' time, or maybe next year probably, I will have a look at that. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I'm ED-SKaR, and I always will be.